Good afternoon and welcome to the Sustainable Materials Management Webinar Series, a joint effort between the National Recycling Coalition and the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center. My name is Wayne Bowen and I'm the Program Manager for the Center and will serve as your moderator today. We would like to extend a special thanks to Bob Hollis of the Mobius Network for providing the webinar management software for this series and Lisa Ruggiero of the National Recycling Coalition for providing technical support. Today's webinar focus is on recovered paper markets. We have an excellent presenter today, Miles Cohen. Following the presentation, we will conduct a question and answer session. If you have a question or comment, please use the GoToWebinar dialog box located in the control panel on your screen. You may also use the dialog box to request assistance if you are experiencing technical difficulties during the webinar. Please note that an edited version of this webinar will be made available for viewing via YouTube links on the National Recycling Coalition and Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center websites. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Miles Cohen, President of Pratt Recycling. As the Chief Executive, Mr. Cohen is responsible for Pratt's network of recycling plants, its material recovery facilities throughout the United States, as well as directing the sourcing for Pratt's 100% recycled paper mills. Mr. Cohen's team manages a variety of recycling activities, including collection and processing of paper, plastics, metals, and other materials, operation of material recovery facilities, and more. Additionally, he leads Pratt Industries' Close-the-Loop initiative, which assists Pratt's customers in their environmental sustainability initiatives, enabling them to achieve their zero landfill goals through improved recycling and waste-to-energy solutions. Mr. Cohen joined Pratt Industries in 2008. Prior to Pratt Industries, Cohen was president and general manager of Sunoco Recycling, a division of Sunoco Products Company. And now I'll hand the program over to Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Wayne, and welcome everybody. I find this is quite an interesting topic, and you'll excuse me or pardon me, but Wayne is going to drive the presentation, so I'm going to ask him when to move to slide. If we will have some time for question and answer at the end. If we don't have time to get to all the questions, if there are questions, my email address is at the bottom of that first slide, mcohen@prattindustries.com. So feel free to get to me, via email. The title of this is The Roller Coaster Ride, Unique, Unpredictable, and Unprecedented, because there are very, very few commodities and very, very few products that are as unique and unpredictable as recovered fiber. And we're going to talk about all the grades of recovered fiber, but specifically we're going to talk about, things like old corrugated containers, cardboard boxes, newspapers, etc. During my short time at Pratt, about 5 years, the pricing of these commodities have ranged from a low of $0 to $20 to a high of about $175 or $180. So what commodities can you think of that have changed in price sort of ninefold over a 4 or 5 year period? And that's not just up, it's up and down, up and down, up and down. So these are unpredictable, and that's what I think makes this business very interesting and a lot of fun. Today I am going to tell you a little bit about Pratt because I suspect that a lot of people don't know a significant about Pratt. I'm going to talk about some of the global trends that are going on, some of the things that are happening in the USA, and which paper grades are, as we say, booming and busting, which ones are going up the roller coaster and which ones are coming down the roller coaster. We say we're the largest family-held packaging company in the world. It's the Pratt family. The Pratt family originally started in Australia with the logo on the right-hand side, the Visi Paper Company. We primarily are into corrugated boxes, point-of-purchase displays, and a lot of other things. We've been in this country, in the U.S., for about 20 years as Pratt Industry. That is our logo on the left-hand side, Pratt 100% recycled. And we are strictly our paper mills are strictly 100% recycled material. We do not use any trees. We do not use any virgin pulp in the manufacturing of our products. So, you know, you can say that environmental sustainability is in our DNA, and that we've been ahead of our time because we've been doing 100% recycled long before it was fashionable, you know, 40 plus years in the business. Anthony Pratt, who's pictured on the left-hand side, is our chairman. And, you know, one of the things that he did, going back about 5 or 6 years ago, is committed $1 billion on our recycling infrastructure to the Clinton Global Initiative. And we are well on our way to achieving that goal. And I'll talk about some of the initiatives and some of the investments that we are making and that we have made over the last few years. Being vertically integrated, which I will also talk about a little bit later, this is a bit of a confusing slide, but we are a 100% closed loop, vertically integrated. So if you were to start at, you know, around noon or 1 o'clock and look at the pictures on these slides, you would see a material recovery facility, material from the curbside recyclables, which we process for a lot of towns and a lot of municipalities and a lot of counties throughout the country. I'll speak about some of those after. That arrow goes to 3 o'clock. We bale up the material and we end up with various types of commodities, but mainly what we are looking for is the recovered fiber and the recovered paper, and which is referred to as OCC, Old Corrugated Containers. Down at 5 o'clock in that chart, you see a paper mill. It's coming off of our paper machine from one of our paper mills, which is a big master roll of 100% recycled container board. We make them into new corrugated boxes. They go to the retail marketplace, which you see a little picture at 9 o'clock. And then those retailers and manufacturers and distributors take that material and they, instead of sending it to the landfill, they bale it up. It's usually worth something of value, as it is today. And it goes back to our material recovery facility, and that process starts all over and over and over again. Up in the upper left-hand corner, you see some bottles and cans. Those we sell off to other end-user markets. Companies who use PET, HDPE, aluminum, steel, glass, etc. We handle all of those for, again, a lot of communities, a lot of municipalities around the country. And then you also see another arrow with a little picture in the lower left-hand side, which things like broken wood pallets and construction and demolition wood, carpet, a myriad of other materials that we bring to our waste to clean energy plant. And we built a plant in Conyers, Georgia, which is right outside of Atlanta, about 3 years ago, and we displaced 100% of the natural gas that we were using to make paper, and we replaced it with a waste to clean energy fluidized bed gasification system. And we are using anywhere between 700 and 800 tons of material per day that was previously bound for the landfill that is now being used to create the energy needed to run a paper mill. And if anybody knows anything about paper mills, they are extremely energy intensive. You will see just a map of all of our plants, and those are in different colors based on whether or not they are paper mills, whether or not they are recycling plants, whether or not they are corrugated box manufacturing plants or POP display plants. And also on the West Coast, we have some distribution centers out there as well, and those are noted in California. We also have a corrugated box plant in Monterrey, Mexico. I've mentioned that we're fully integrated. We have a recycling division, paper mills, 3 paper mills, corrugating division that makes large corrugated sheets before they're made into boxes, converting divisions which make boxes as well as POP displays, and we have a specialties group that sells some products into retail specialties. We have three 100% recycled mills, and this is the first time that I've done this presentation that I've added in that little thing in between the 3 and 100, but soon to be 4. We have announced that we are building a 4th mill, 100% recycled mill, and that's going to be in the state of Indiana, and that'll be operational in the middle of 2015. Our other 3 mills right now are in Conyers, Georgia, which is the first mill that we built in the U.S. The second mill that we built is the only mill that's in New York City. It's in Staten Island, New York. And our third mill is in Shreveport, Louisiana, and that was built about 5 years ago. I already spoke about our waste to clean energy gasification plant, and we have some of these in Australia as well, but this is the only one that we have in the United States. Talk a little bit on the next slide about Pratt Recycling. And we have 11 material recovery facilities, which are referred to as MRFs. They are mainly in the southeast and southwest United States, as well as in the Midwest. And we have a group of people, about 20 some odd people, who are waste assessment representatives who go out to manufacturers, distributors, et cetera, and really try to help them figure out zero landfill solutions. How can they maximize their recycling? And at the same time, how can they send as little as possible to the landfill? And we have a number of examples and solutions with customers that we have helped achieve zero landfill. Just the recycling division of Pratt services about 20,000 recycling customers a week. And we recycle 50% of the New York City paper curbside. So in that picture, that one picture that's there, that's a barge, and that's pulled up against our paper mill in New York. But when you see all that paper on the street in New York City as you walk the streets of New York and you're wondering where all that goes to, the Department of Sanitation picks that up every night, brings it to a transfer station, which is on the Hudson River at 59th Street, dumps it into a barge. Those barges hold between 400 and 600 tons of recycled paper. That barge goes over to our mill in Staten Island, and several hours later, there's brand new boxes being made, and anything from pizza boxes to boxes for major consumer products companies like Procter & Gamble or Home Depot or Energizer batteries, or the myriad of customers that we have. And although we don't do it in other cities in barges, we also have contracts and agreements with many, many other cities around the country. We do the recycling for the city of Savannah, Georgia. We do it in Denton, Texas. We do it in Shreveport, Louisiana, for the curbside pickup processing, and also we service thousands of commercial and industrial customers. We are opening up our first solid waste transfer station, again, to help people with zero landfill and to take some, municipal solid waste and to recover as much as possible the recyclables out of it to minimize what goes to the landfill. And we're doing that in Rockdale County, Georgia, which again is outside of Atlanta. Just, very quickly, our customers are sort of a who's who of consumer products companies and manufacturers, everybody from Diageo to industrial companies like Cummins to consumer products companies like Clorox and Fujifilm and Unilever and Procter & Gamble. If you go into any Home Depot store in North America, you will see a huge wall of moving and storage materials, and all 4 sides of those boxes say Pratt 100% recycled. We were the Eco Options Vendor of the Year a few years ago, about 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and it's been a hugely successful program to them. So with that, next slide, please. That's sort of the end of the section about Pratt. It's probably more than you wanted to know, and you really joined today to find out what's going on in recovered fiber, and not for me to talk about our company, Pratt Industries, but I did that so everybody would have perspective about who we are and what we do, and the fact that we're very sustainable and a 100% recycled company. So now I'm going to talk about sort of why the roller coaster ride and some of the main drivers and some of the main reasons. I have 10 key drivers that I talk about in terms of what's going on in recovered fiber. And I'm just going to talk to you about what paper grades are growing and what paper grades are declining. And I don't think I'm going to say anything that's any surprise to anybody, because whether you're into this market or not, you're gonna say, I think, that a lot of this stuff makes a lot of sense to you. There's the way I look at it, my viewpoint is there's four major categories of paper. If you look at paper manufacturing in the U.S., and let's call it 90 million tons, 80 to 90 million tons of new paper that's manufactured. That's paper mills all over the country and all over North America. There's a whole lot of specialty grades out there, but probably 85 to 90% of the paper that's manufactured is in one of these four categories. Starting on the left, container board. Container board is the brown paper that's used to make cardboard boxes. And it starts as a thin sort of, almost looks like a wrapping paper, if you will. And before it's put into corrugated sheets and fused together with other plies of paper and then cut into boxes. Booming is probably a bit of an overstatement. But, in this industry being, which is a huge industry, getting a particular category that's growing 1.5%, 2%, 3%, 4% a year is, quite frankly, pretty amazing, considering the category has been around for, decades and decades and, 100 years. It's a huge segment. It's well over 30 million tons of the paper manufactured in North America, but it's steady growth. And it's trending more towards recycled content. And I'm going to talk about that, more coming up in a couple of slides. But there is going to be a global shortage of OCC. OCC is old corrugated containers. These boxes are made, the paper for these boxes is made out of one of two materials. It's either recycled material, old boxes that are coming from the back of a Walmart store, a grocery store, a manufacturer, distributor, or the material coming out of your households, newspapers and cardboard boxes. You order something online from Amazon.com. It comes in a box. You put it out with your recyclables, and that box gets recycled and goes to a paper mill to get made into a new paper box. That's one way new boxes get made. The other way is from cutting down trees. We don't do any of that. And the trend is that the marketplace is looking for more and more recycled content in their boxes. So that's a growing category, particularly for the recycled markets. I don't have to tell you about the next one over, newsprint. Usually when I'm doing a presentation like this, I'm, standing up in front of a group of people, not that I do this that often, and I say, give me a show of hands and, raise your hand if you still subscribe to the daily newspaper and get it delivered to your house 5 or 7 days a week. So everybody on the phone, you can raise your hand right now. I can see all of you. And it looks like it's 22%. Only kidding. I have no idea how many it is, but I will bet you it's probably 1 in 5 of those who are on the phone today. Newsprint is down 60% in the past decade. And what's happening is the material recovery facilities used to get enough newspaper to separate it out from cardboard boxes and printing and writing paper and junk mail and office paper and stuff like that. There was enough, 5 years ago, there was plenty of newspaper to make a bale and trailer loads of a grade called ONP, old newspapers. That is becoming less and less frequent. It's still sold and marketed as a grade, but more and more material recovery facilities are taking that newspaper and mixing it with other grades to make what's called mixed paper. And quite frankly, the survival of newspapers, and I'm going to talk about this a little later, for each of these categories is obviously in question. Towel and tissue on a global basis is one of the categories that's growing. It continues to grow. There's some new tissue mills that have been built over the last decade. And I apologize for the acronyms that some of you may not be familiar with, but recycled content is wanted, and SOP and SOW stands for sorted office paper or sorted office waste. Is these tissue mills are wondering where will this, if printing and writing grades are going down and there's more demand for recycled content in tissue, where is that material going to come from? And quite frankly, that's a good question. That's a bit of an unknown, because I think the tissue mills are going to struggle with finding recycled content in the years to come. And then the last category that's a large category within paper grades is printing and writing. These are your catalogs, your magazines, your office paper, brochures, etc. And it just keeps declining and declining every year. A lot of commercial printers have scaled down. A lot of them have gone out of business. They're still going to be around for a while, but it is a category that is, really moved more and more online, which none of us are surprised at. So those are the four major categories, and that's sort of what's, it's pretty simple. Container board and towel and tissue are growing. Newsprint and printing and writing are, not doing too well. So how does all this really, and the growth and decline of these categories, predict what's going to happen to recovered paper supply and prices over the next decade? And my belief is, that there's going to continue to be a roller coaster. If you look at the last 10 years, there's been quite a roller coaster on the prices and the availability of recovered paper, and that is not going to change. And I mentioned I'm going to talk about 10 key drivers, and I will spend a minute or two on each of these, and then we'll have some time for some Q&A. I looked at the list of people who are signed up for today, and a lot of people in the environmental space. And I will tell you, one of the key drivers on recovered fiber, on the demand and the pricing, is the fact that environmental sustainability has become really, really hot. So when a retailer such as Walmart, and it could be any retailer, it could be Home Depot, it could be Target, it could be the Kroger or grocery chain, et cetera, has a sustainability initiative and says to their suppliers, we are going to grade you on how much recycled content you have and how sustainable your products are. That actually has a huge impact, because those manufacturers come to the industry, they come to companies like us and our competitors, and they'd say, how can you make your product with only 100% recycled content? That's not the easiest thing to do, particularly in this industry, because there's a lot of old paper mills that have been around for 30, 40, 50, and 60 years that were built as pulp mills, and they use virgin pulp, which come from trees. And it's not that easy to change that technology over. So somebody like us, we consider ourselves being in a pretty good market position by having a 100% recycled product. There's also a lot of organizations like Global Green, like the Sustainable Packaging Coalition, like FSC and SFI, that are organizations that certify whether or not your product is sustainable and environmentally sustainable, and those things will continue, and that is going to continue to drive up the demand for recycled products versus using natural resources. This is not just a U.S. phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. A lot of new paper mills have been built in Asia, and when you think about Asia paper mills, people think about China, and that is very true. But I will tell you that there have been paper mills over the last several years that have been built in Korea and in Vietnam and Malaysia and many other countries as well. So it's not only China that is the only driver. And those countries don't have the natural resources. They don't have the trees. They do not have the collection infrastructures to collect the recycled paper. So from a standpoint of supply, you can see why supply is going down. From that prior slide I had, it said, hey, newspapers are declining. Printing and writing grades are declining. Catalogs are declining, et cetera. Well, if there's less of that stuff being produced, there's less to collect afterwards. So there's smaller supply, but there's more demand. That does create an imbalance globally. And long term, I believe there will be a imbalance of supply and demand. Which is why it's important for a company like ours to be fully integrated and have our own material recovery facilities, because we want to be in control of the supply of our material, which is the feedstock for our paper mills, as much as possible. So paper exported out of the United States and Asia will still be one of the biggest factors. But there are some things that on the next slide I'll qualify that before I go there, I will say, and this is for people who are not involved in the recovered fiber markets, they usually don't know this fact, but about 40% of all recovered fiber material that's collected in the U.S. is exported. Most of that goes to Asia every year. So if you put out your newspapers or your magazines and your cardboard boxes, or you're a retailer and you have bales of corrugated boxes and that type of thing, there's a very, very good chance, a 4 out of 10 chance, that newspaper that you're putting out on your curbside, or the paper that you're recycling, is going to end up in a container, and it's going to end up on a ship, and it's going to end up going to China. Or Vietnam or another country. And if you think about those seagoing containers, those big containers, there's about 2,000 of those per day that are loaded to leave this country full of recovered fiber. So it is the largest export from this country is recovered fiber. We do not manufacture anything in this country that even comes close to the amount of recovered fiber that is exported from this country that also leaves this country. So that still will be, the biggest factor. What's happening with Asia short term and long term? Short term and long term, it'll be very cyclical. The pricing will go up and down. I say it's currently busted because there has been lower demand out of Asia, so the prices on certain paper grades have really been depressed a little bit. But that's been good for U.S. manufacturers. But I believe soon that will turn around, and there will be a need for that recycled paper. It's very, very unpredictable, and the peaks and valleys will continue. On a long-term basis, my prediction is that China and all of Asia will become self-sufficient on recovered fiber. First of all, the growth of the middle class is huge, so there will be more consumption of goods in Asia, and as people who live in Asia consume more of the goods that they manufacture, as opposed to those goods being exported to other countries, then what will happen is those boxes that those materials come in will get recycled and recovered, and which leads to the next point of the MRF expansion exploding. One company in 2011 or 2012, one recycler added 100 recycling centers across the country of China. Well, for a big country like China, that's not that many, but when you think that that's just one company that did that, there are supposedly another few hundred that are being put in this year. So the recycling infrastructure is increasing significantly. So between the growth of the middle class, more consumption of material over there, more recycling infrastructure being put in, I think that, sometime in the late end of this decade, that there will be more self-sufficiency, and there'll be limited exports from this country to Asia for recovered paper. Old newspapers, the fourth item that I have, there's a grade called number 8 news and number 6 news, ONP number 6 and ONP number 8, on the monthly trading index that is used to trade recovered fiber. It's going to plummet even deeper than predicted. In 2012, newsprint consumption in the U.S., actually in North America, dropped almost around 20% in 2012, 20-21%, somewhere in that range. 2013 is not a whole lot healthier. It's a little healthier. I looked at some numbers yesterday that says year-to-date newsprint consumption versus last year is down another 11 or 12%. But again, we're talking in the last decade a 70% decline, and it's not coming back. Newspapers and newsprints will continue to struggle, and as you know, many daily newspapers have already cut back from 7 days and are going to 2 and 3 day circulation. That is a trend that I think we'll see continue. And my bottom bullet point is I think we've started to see what we call the beginning of the end for newspapers. Will they still be here in 2020? I don't know. But they'll certainly be a lot smaller than they are today, and there won't be a grade of recovered fiber that'll just be called ONP newspapers. One more point on newspapers that I'd like to make is there's this grade of paper called number 1 mixed paper, and ONP, old newspapers, and mixed paper used to be 2 separate grades. They are more and more becoming one grade and converging, and it's very, very difficult for material recovery facilities to distinguish what comes out of the baler is that newspaper or is that mixed paper, because they're looking very much the same as they used to, and they've really already become one grade. And that's demonstrated by the next slide, which shows that historically, if you go back to 2002, this grade of paper called old newspapers, ONP, used to trade at a premium of $24, $22, $28, $30, up to $40 more than mixed paper. And if you look what's happened over the last 3 years, and the last 4 years, is that mixed paper, which has always been considered an inferior grade, and it really is not, but sort of the bottom of the totem pole of what the value of a recovered fiber is, mixed paper was actually trading at a higher price than newspaper. In 2010, this -4 means that the published price for old newspapers per ton was $4 less per ton than mixed paper was. And in 2012, that old newspapers were $6 less, when again, 3 years earlier in 2008, it was $41 more. 4 years later in 2012, it became worth $6 less. So it's sort of a flip-flopping of the 2 grades of paper, and they really have converged into one grade. Driver number 6 is old corrugated containers, old corrugated boxes that are coming out of the back of your retail stores and grocery stores and whatever. That is the lifeblood of recovered fiber. And, the thing that we see happening with that for the future is, premiums and discounts being paid or being discounted based on the quality of fiber, because we've seen a huge divergence. And that brings into the next slide, please, into, OCC, because there's now the potential for splitting OCC into domestic versus non-domestic grades. You can look at certain cardboard boxes and say that's from an imported, products that were imported. The color of it, the quality of it, the length of the fiber looks different, and mills consider it a different grade. So many mills now are downgrading what might be called Asian OCC, but it's really foreign OCC. It doesn't necessarily have to come from Asia. It's just that's where a lot of our imports come from, and it seems like there's a lot of shorter fiber, and there is a lot of shorter fiber in the cardboard boxes that come from that come to this country packed with imported products. Some of the newer things that if you are into recovered paper markets that you don't see if you're not in there, is that there's an organization called PSI, Paper Stock Industries, That is part of the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries, which is ISRI, which is the trade organization for the recycling industry based in Washington, D.C. And there are a lot of organizations trying to find paper mills, and it's been difficult, that can recycle what's called aseptic packaging. And that is your juice boxes, your milk cartons, juice cartons. You might see them in a non-refrigerated section in an area where there's soups, soy milk, stuff like that. Those typically have not been recyclable. That industry has a trade organization called the Carton Council, and they have worked very, very hard to find paper mills who could actually take that material and recycle it. It's pretty hard. There's a lot of polycoating. There's a lot of foils in addition to the paper. So whenever you're dealing with recycling something that has multiple layers of materials on it, it becomes a real challenge to recycle, and you're going to end up spending sometimes more recycling a product than what you can extract for the value of the material. But I do have to give the Carton Council credit and this group of people credit. They have worked tirelessly to get this approved as a new paper grade, PSI grade number 52, and it's gable top cartons and aseptic packaging. So what I would say is stay tuned. You might see more about that, in the next, probably not the next year, but I think 4 or 5 years from now, you will see that will, people are going to figure out how to recycle that. Driver number 8 is printing and writing grades. I've already covered that. In my booming and busted slide back at the beginning where I talked about the 4 types of paper, the one all the way on the right-hand side was printing and writing. It continues to decline, and it's the demise of office paper, people printing less stuff, saving it electronically, all the catalogs that used to get printed, all the mail order catalogs that used to come to your house. Now it seems like they come one time a year during the holiday season. All the brochures, all of that stuff is moved online, and there's just less of that to recycle. And again, we operate 11 MRFs. We see it every day. We look, month to month at our volumes of printing and writing grades of what we collect to recycle, and there's just less of it. So that'll continue to go down, and that's sort of on the downslope of the roller coaster. Driver number 9 is, I think, third-party certification. And what I talked about as the first driver regarding just more, impact by people who are into environmental sustainability, companies, retailers, et cetera, is going to force more people to use recyclable material. And what's happening in recyclable material is people are now measuring pre-consumer versus post-consumer. And I won't get into that whole thing. But there is more measurement of what's used, what's pre-consumer versus post-consumer. And then lastly, in the last slide, or the second to the last slide, Wayne, there's a lot of legislative things. There's a lot of plastic bag bans and paper bag bans and deposits for paper bags and, can and bottle deposits, which we don't get into that much, and something called EPR, which I'm sure several people on the phone are aware of, extended producer responsibility, which has sort of, taken hold in some countries, but I think there's still a question mark as to the future of EPR legislation, for the U.S. and what makes sense for this country. But that's sort of the last driver, and the 10th driver that I have is legislation will certainly have an impact on the value of the materials and whether or not materials get collected or not. And with that brings us to our last slide, which is 15 minutes if we need it. Time for questions.
Okay, thank you, Miles. We're now going to field some questions from the audience. Again, if you have a question, please enter them on the GoToWebinar dialog box. We have a couple questions, but I believe they were covered in one of your slides concerning soft and hardcover books, the printed materials, and I believe you basically discussed that they were
Well,
declining.
yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. It's funny. I was in a meeting 2 hours ago about soft and hardcover books internally in our company here. We use them in our process. We can use them to a limit because, there's binders and glues and things like that in the pulping process that sometimes slow down the pulping process. But generally speaking, there is a market for books, and there are a few companies that even specialize in books. There's a few companies a few recyclers that we work with that have debinding facilities that, because hardcover books are harder to recycle, that actually cut off the bindings and try to take off as much of the adhesive as possible and take the covers off the book and just end up with the paper, which is the most valuable part of the book. But yeah, book recycling is sort of a niche within the recycling industry, and there are some people who specialize in that, and we use those books. If you have books, or if you're a municipality, we have one municipality that we deal with in South Carolina, and that has a big library system, and we get their books from them. And sometimes we use them in our own mills. Sometimes we shred them and blend them in with other types of products, et cetera, to make a customized recycled material pack for somebody.
Okay, here's a question asking if you're seeing increasing quality issues of recovered paper from single stream collection, like a China green fence for paper.
That's an excellent question. Last week was for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday was the paper recycling conference in Chicago, and there was a panel on this very topic. All of us paper mills have the same opinion on it. Is that the curbside recycling used to be a dual stream system mainly in this country. It went to single stream. For those who don't I think everybody here understands what that is, but if you don't, dual stream would be you would separate your newspapers, you'd put them in a grocery bag or something, and then you would separate your cans and bottles. A truck would come by, and it would separate the materials at the curb in different compartments on the truck. It was a more expensive way to collect material, but it was a cheaper way to process the material. As a way to increase recycling rates, the industry said, hey, let's make it simple for the consumer. It's a lot more complicated than this, but I'm really oversimplifying. Let's make it simple for the consumer. Let's have one bin, and they throw their glass, their bottles, their cans, their newspaper, their magazines, throw everything in one container. That has increased recycling rates. There's no question about that because it's simple for the consumer. What it also has done is increased the cost of processing of those recyclables because they're a lot more difficult to process. And what happens is the glass breaks in the truck, in the material recovery facility. It gets mixed in with the paper and things like that. And and what happens is it's become more and more difficult to separate out the paper and have a cleaner mixed paper pack or newsprint pack. And so the question was, has the single stream recycling had an effect on the quality of paper? I think that's what it was. It absolutely has, and it's not been good for the recycling industry from the standpoint of quality, or the paper industry in terms of recyclability. It has been good for the recycling industry in terms of getting more tonnage in their facilities on a monthly basis. So it's had some good effects and some bad effects. Unfortunately, the bad effects have sort of outweighed the good ones, in my opinion.
That question did mention the green fence policy. Do you have any comment on that with regard to paper?
I don't have any comment on that. I think, I think a lot of companies were shipping a lot of material that they should not have been shipping overseas. and it was probably something that that possibly needed to happen. The green fence continues, as I understand it, and we'll see if that continues on a long-term basis or not. I think that if green fence is specific to China, I think if there's all of a sudden a shortage of paper in China, you will see that the green fence will be a lot more lenient than it is today.
Will the growth in recycled content, boxboard, and cardboard decrease the quality of the material? How do you ensure quality if the material has been recycled over and over again?
That's an excellent question. The answer is it has not decreased quality. As a matter of fact, if you look at that slide that I have with our customer logos on it, major consumer products companies, major quality standards on ensuring boxes don't harm the material inside and they protect the material inside. Packaging engineers, big departments of packaging engineers. These companies that are, selling their products, their billboard is the primary packaging, the product itself, and they want it protected. And if they felt that that was at risk, they would not be using recycled materials. There's been a lot of good technology in how to make 100% recycled products that have the same strength and property qualities of a craft box, a box that's made from, virgin fiber and pulp. And, not only in our particular case, other box companies too that make 100% recycled boxes, I would say that the quality is not an issue at all.
Miles, does that statement apply to foreign-based cardboard?
The thing I would say about foreign-based cardboard is there's some other materials other than recycled materials that some of those paper mills use. And, you actually see that some of the foreign material that's coming into this country, because they use so much recycled content from the U.S., has actually gotten a little bit better over the years.
So the foreign material has less foreign material in it.
Oh, well, yeah, most of the foreign material is made with, back to my point, about 40% of the material from the U.S. is, shipped overseas. Most of the material that is used is, material from Europe, U.S., etc. So, again, it's more of an issue of what's being packaged in some of those other countries, some of the textiles and domestic clothing and things like that, as opposed to major consumer products brands where they are using just a different box that's I'm going to say a lower quality box. And again, there's generally speaking, those are of lower quality than what you get in the U.S.
Okay, here's a similar question. This appears to be coming from a municipal recycling coordinator. I tell my residents not to recycle greasy pizza boxes. Are they still a problem for paper mills?
We can take them.
Okay.
There are some paper mills that stay away from those type of things or try to discourage them. But our mills can use pizza boxes.
Okay.
We have no problem using pizza boxes in our paper mills.
Okay, next question.
Obviously, we don't want any pizza left over in the pizza box. So pizza box without pizza. As a matter of fact, there's a video online that Walmart did about 3 years ago that you can find if you go to YouTube and put in Walmart pizza box, about a program about recycling pizza boxes and making it out of 100% recycled material. And you can find that on YouTube.
Okay. Next question, for every ton of OCC taken to a mill, what tonnage leaves a mill as new 100% recycled cardboard box? In other words, what is the residue rate for that material?
Right, I understand. You can use anywhere between a 10 and 15, depending on the mill, depending on the pulping process. There's no two mills that are exactly alike. There's no two tons of OCC that are exactly alike. So there's a lot of variables involved, depending on if is it a batch pulper, is it a continuous pulper, what's the pulping time, etc. But generally speaking, you can say that you're going to lose somewhere between 10 and 20%. So if you, and 12%, 13, 14%, a pretty good number. But it could be upwards of 20%, and it might be, right around 10. But if you need to make 1,000 tons of new container board, you need around 1,100 tons, 1,120 tons of OCC.
Okay. Which leads into the next question. What exactly is used in your biofuel facility? Is it wood, trash, residue, etc.?
We don't use trash. We don't use trash as in trash municipal solid waste. We do not use that. We use the rejects from our paper mill, because you think about a corrugated box that you throw out. It has tape on it. It has labels on it. And it's got glue and adhesive and things like that. Those things are pulped out of the pulping process. And where all of that used to go to the landfill, we squeeze the water out of that, and that's got some good BTU value, and it's a lot of plastic, which is petroleum-based products, so high BTU value. We use quite a bit of wood. Broken pallets, construction and demolition wood that's not painted, because we don't want to use lead paint or anything like that. So unpainted, pallets and construction waste. We have a tier 2 automotive supplier that we deal with that has the trim from the headliner of the headliner on the roof of the car, and the seat upholstery and the carpets, and the trim from that material we use. So just a myriad of some wood chips that we use. Just a myriad of materials. We use unrecyclable plastics. There's some mixed plastics that are not number 1s and number 2s, and they're like 3s through 7s, and a lot of MRFs don't separate those out, and again, they have good BTU value. We cannot use PVC. We cannot use nylon. We do not use tires, but we use just a whole lot of different woods and plastics, and rejects from paper mills. Rejects from our own paper mills.
What grade of paper in a single stream MRF has the greatest impact on the value of a single stream load?
Well, that's changed quite a bit. It used to be newspaper, because that used to be, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that was close to, 60 to 70% of, what came into a MRF, and it's now in the 50% range, if not less than that. So, I would still say newspaper and cardboard, your OCC, are the two grades that are largest grades, and they're the grades that are worth the most money. Now, the grade that's worth the most money is sorted office paper, which is the paper that comes out of your printer at home and stuff like that. Unfortunately, in the single stream, there's not a whole lot of that. And what there is pretty hard to separate when it gets mixed in with the plastic and the glass and the bottles and all of that. But we have some unique technology with MRFs, and we have some unique ways to extract values for some of that materials, and to significantly reduce labor costs in MRFs. So if there's any specific cities or counties or municipalities that want to talk further about this, we can show you some of the unique, and I'll use the word proprietary. They're not necessarily proprietary. It's more of a unique business model that we have around making sure we extract the most value for communities out of their material recovery facilities.
Does the anticipated decline of recycled fiber exports by 2018 suggest that U.S. demand for recycled content packaging will have an adequate supply going forward?
Oh yeah, I do think there will be an adequate supply. If there is independence in the foreign markets and they're not as dependent on the U.S., there'll definitely be adequate supply of recycled fiber in the U.S. because that 40% of what's collected today that is export will be a much smaller number than that, and there will be adequate supply. I'm not concerned about the supply of recycled fiber for the U.S. I would be surprised if I was a newsprint mill and I just wanted newsprint. But again, if I'm a newsprint manufacturer, I'm more concerned about, the viability of, my business as a whole and how to, which several mills are doing, and we won't talk about that now, but how several mills are actually reinventing themselves and turning themselves into mills that make different grades that were making newsprint last year, but this year they're looking at bag kraft and linerboard and medium and that type of thing, and some of that is occurring right now. But there'll be adequate supply of recovered fiber.
Are there certain industries or businesses that you are seeing more contamination of paper due to single stream? They give an example of healthcare facilities.
No, we really don't. We work with some healthcare. We don't see single stream happening in the commercial industrial side as much as we do on the residential side. They want to extract the value as much as possible out of their recyclables. So they don't want to mix it all together. And, hospitals in particular in the medical field do a really, really good job. I'm not sure if it's due to legislation or why it is, or due to, regulation or legislation, or due to policy or whatever, where they're separating the biological stuff. And that's a whole other, medical hazardous waste area kind of thing. And that stuff does not get mixed in with the recyclable. So we are not seeing any more contamination on the commercial industrial side than we've ever seen. If anything, it's less. It's the contamination is all on the residential side.
How many times can OCC fiber be recycled back into an OCC?
I'm not sure about that answer because I'm not a paper maker. So the numbers I've heard in the past is I think 6 times, 7 times you can recycle a box. But again, the short fibers come out of the process, if you will, during the pulping.
This question concerns bleached paper. It might be actually unbleached paper that the MRF does not accept it. What is the reason for not taking that?
Should be no reason for not taking that. I need to know more information, but we don't have anything in our MRFs where we say we don't take bleached or unbleached or anything like that.
Okay. I think that's all the questions we have. So thank you for those excellent questions to the audience and excellent answers also, Miles. In closing, this webinar, like all the webinars in this series, has been recorded and will be made available via YouTube links on both the National Recycling Coalition and Recycling Market Center websites. Again, thank you for joining us. We hope you'll join us for next month's webinar scheduled for Tuesday, November 19th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And again, thank you, Miles, for taking the time out for this presentation, and have a great day.